began as Superintendent of Public Instruction. So thank you for being here. In 2012, your efforts to elect me led to a victory with more votes in the governor's race, and I know you remember that and proudly spread that about. I've been on the front lines fighting for you and fighting with you and for you and the children in our state, making positive changes despite the governor's political agenda for education. So I know the changes over the last 3 years, because there's been lots of changes over the last 3 years, and I know that change isn't necessarily something that you want to see, but we had to see some change to move forward in a positive direction. So when I was elected, you may or may not recall, and those of you who've heard me speak several times know that I say this quite frequently, two opposite things happened. One is the General Assembly decided to put into law that I must label your schools A, B, C, D, and F. Into law. It wasn't in law until I was elected. Then they did the opposite. They decided to give me the responsibility because of the election itself and the causes that we were electing me for, to oversee the three big systems: standards, assessments, and accountability that inform those grades. And I was a happy person. I'm like, oh my gosh, they've given me the authority to oversee these three big things. These are the very things we need to be talking about. So I know it caused a lot of anxiety out in the field, but I can tell you we are headed in some good directions, despite what you hear in the politics that is going on at the State House. And it's really because of your voice. It's not because of Glenda Ritz. It's because the voice of the public school teachers and the public school advocates at large are having their voice be heard. And that's the reason that that happens. So let me talk just a second about the standards and the assessment and accountability, because you don't very often get me right here in your presence because of my very busy schedule. And so I want to make sure that I'm updating you at the same time I'm going to talk about politics. So with the standards, I'm excited about where we are with our standards, especially in the area of mathematics. And you, at your level, teaching in your classrooms, may not have known that we were remediating students who actually passed our algebra test to the tune of $35 to $40 million a year when they left our walls at grade 12. But that wasn't alignment. Something was wrong. So we really needed to have an in-depth conversation, especially in mathematics. I'm very excited about where we are now and what that looks like. And then we have assessments. So let me give you a little insight about my view on assessments, because that's why I ran for this position in the first place. It literally happened in April of 2012 when we had the IREAD test at third grade for the very first time. And I had a little third grader come to my library and say, Mrs. Ritz, I don't need to check out a book today because I just did well on my reading test. And I said to myself, what have we done to the children? What have we done to them? Because they think that the act of reading is to actually perform well on some kind of exam. And I know that that frustration resonates with all of you as well, but students really do feel that inside of them in a great many cases. And so with that, you know, I had a vested interest, and I saw what assessments and the multiple assessments and the weekly assessments and the bi-weekly assessments and what all that was doing to class instruction and getting kids excited about what they should be there for, which is to learn to be learners. That's what they're there for, to learn to be learners. So I have a statewide student advisory council, and it's made up of a representative at a high school from each congressional district. And Pearson is the first name of a young lady who served on that commission, at that advisory council last year. And they all had to write an essay to me about what it is they thought the state needed to address with education. And I will tell you, all of their essays were right on par with what you think we should be working on. They're just right on par. But her last line was, schools should not be a drive-through experience. They should be a dine-in experience. And I said, oh, Pearson, I cannot say that any better, and I'm gonna quote you everywhere I go, because that's what needs to happen in education. It's about the kids, and the students need to experience that dine-in flavor. They need to delve into their learning. They need to learn to be learners, and it's not about the tests. And I can't tell you how many of them and how many conversations we had about the tests with the students as well. So assessment, I'm all about having less testing and more time for you. And if you have an assessment, if we have an assessment, it has to be meaningful to what you do. So let me talk to you just a second about Senate Bill 566 that was coming down the pipe last time. It included a lot of things that weren't good, but it included one item that I was in support of, and that was streamlining the testing system. So that when students come into your classroom, your formative assessment, knowing the reading levels of the kids when they come to you, kind of knowing where they are in the middle of the year, knowing where they are at the end of the year, that's all you need. That's all you need. Because the word assessment in our nation today is equated with the word test. And that's the very sad part about it. Because you assess every single day in your classroom. Every time you listen to a child read, every time you look at them with a writing sample, every time you help them in conversations for debate, every time you work with children, you are assessing them continuously. It does not have to be in the form of a test. And we have to move ourselves away from that and trust you, who are who've been trained and have the pedagogy in order to assess our students accurately, to be able to move forward with kids individually. So with that, I'm hoping that the U.S. Department, in the reauthorization of No Child Left Behind, actually give the states the flexibility to have the type of assessment that we want. And that would be knowing where our kids do perform. That would be that formative that you have throughout the school year, and not the pass-fail test. Everybody in here who gives that ISTA could tell the state of Indiana who's not going to pass that test before we spend millions of dollars giving it. Every single one of you could do that. And so it doesn't inform us, it doesn't tell us what we're doing. It is used as a stick to label our schools. And we have to move away from that. So I'm excited the conversation about assessment is throughout the nation. I'm excited it's at the federal level. I'm excited that it was introduced in our General Assembly last year, because that's where I'm headed. I'm headed for making sure that we have assessments that have meaning to you in the classroom, and that's all we need to move our children forward as they need to go. And that's why this year, I fought very hard last year in the General Assembly and the budget work to make sure that the formative assessment was in your court, not the state of Indiana deciding that we were going to use a product and tell you what the schedule was going to be and who you were going to test and what time you were going to do it. No, that's in the hands of you, the experts. And so we've opened that up for you to choose your formative assessments as districts, and the state of Indiana will pay for it. And I couldn't be more excited about that, because that leads to the conversation about where we want to go and how we want to streamline assessment and have meaningful assessments to the students in our state. So that's a little bit about assessments. So I'm working to get it streamlined. Then accountability. So I know many of you are anxious about the grades for 14-15, and I am too. But you know what? We're going to be having in the next month, in October and November, it's going to be a serious conversation about what we're doing with the grades in 14-15. So everybody's decided they're going to wait for the data. And 2 more states just came out this week talking about their drop of 24% performance and this and that on the brand new college and career ready assessments. I'm expecting Indiana to have the same types of responses to that, especially in mathematics. And I'm expecting there to be a drop in performance. So when you have a drop in performance, and you're on a 4-point flawed system of accountability, you're going to have a drop, and that's where you're going to start on the 4-point scale. That's where you're going to start, okay? And then we have a bonus and a penalty point added or subtracted for the growth of your students. Now, just very simple math tells you that if you've got a drop in performance, are you going to see the growth of your students? No. And so penalty points are going to be assigned all over the place. And when a penalty point is assigned, that is a letter grade or 2 drop automatically in your grade at your school. And that's before the other factors might even be figured in. So we have serious reservations about assigning grades to you in the usual manner on just 14-15 grades. 2 flexibilities were proposed. At the federal government, they've allowed all states, every single state in the nation, to not assign grades this year for 14-15, to not assign grades. Over 26 states, the last count I had, which was really several months ago, had taken advantage of that. Indiana is not one of them yet. And so two things could happen with flexibility that we've been approved by the U.S. Department to do. One is we could just freeze them, and everything is according to the 13-14 grades. The other was an idea that we came up with. I came up with a department that actually says, you know, let's hold everybody harmless. If you do better on the 14-15, then you can have that grade. If you don't, then you can keep your 13-14 grade. So those are two things that have been proposed that I've been advocating for quite openly, actually, throughout the state, talking to Indiana chambers and all kinds of groups about it. The Attorney General's office has just come back with its opinion that that would take a legislative action. Doesn't bother me. That's who we need to talk to, and that's who we need to talk to when the actual information starts to come out. So we're making our cut scores for the new test. October 14th, we're going to approve those at the board. And then after that, we're going to see the impact of what that means. So we're going to have a conversation, so stay tuned for that. But I could not be more excited about the new accountability system that's going to be in effect the 15-16 school year. Okay? It's on a 100-point scale. It's going to be equal for performance and growth, at least on the assessment. And it's going to be about your individual student growth. Not compared to their peers around the state of Indiana, estimating what they should be doing. No, it's going to be about what individual students do. And that's going to give you information for the first time on an ISTA test that you've never had before, to really see what it is that your individual students are actually doing and performing and earning. And there's no penalties, there's no negative to it. Students are earning double points for you as a school the whole time. And you'll know what that looks like, and it'll be right up front. And there's total transparency in how that's going to work. So I'm excited about the new accountability system, but what I'm really excited about is that we built the system to be able to handle whatever we put in it. So we can change our assessment, and it'll still be intact. We can put in more measures for elementary and middle school to show what a great school looks like, and it will still be intact. So we've built the system to add and subtract elements of it and still keep the system in place. And so we're pretty excited about that moving forward in the conversation, because also in No Child Left Behind reauthorization, they're going to be pushing for multiple measures. And what is that looking like? Getting away from just the test. And so the conversation is headed in a good direction with that. So then, so those are the three big systems. But if you haven't heard me before on ABCDF labeling of schools, that's not about the quality of your schools. Never was. They like to tout that it is, but that's not what it's doing. It's actually labeling your students. So a high school student with a 3.7 grade average from an F school will never be treated the same as a graduate with a 3.7 from an A school. And you're kidding yourselves if you think they will. Because if you don't think those colleges are looking at the school grades in which they came from, they certainly are. And so every day, every year, we send students out with less opportunities. And there's nothing right about that. And I can't wait for the day when the General Assembly actually changes that and puts us back into a mode of what is really called school improvement. Those grades do not reflect your improvement in your schools one bit. It reflects a test score in most cases, and that's all. But it is really a detriment to the students in the state of Indiana and giving them equal opportunities. It was never more poignant than I was invited to an F high school. And the valedictorian of that high school, her whole speech was about, you don't know us, we're not F. And she talked about all the great things that the kids did. So A to F is very detrimental to our students in the state of Indiana, and I will continue to be on the front with that. We put in outreach for school improvement. We have increased our outreach support. I hire within the region in which they work the outreach coordinators. They know every principal in the state and in their region. They have a vested interest in school improvement because they live there. They live there. They want to see the schools improve, and that's the way to support our schools. In 1 year time, we moved 103 schools from low performing to high performing. That was over 60,000 students, and you know what? They never had to change school. That's what school improvement is all about. It's about making sure we're putting in the right supports to support whatever the local schools need to have. I am dedicated to that. That's an education agenda to school improvement. Also, pre-K, you know, when the governor said, hey, we're not gonna put that grant in for up to $80 million to have universal pre-K in the state of Indiana, some of you may or may not know that 2 months prior to that, he actually signed his name for us to write the grant. It was required that he sign his name for us to even apply for that grant. And then on the day that it was due, after members of the Family Services Center and the Commission for Early Learning, of which the department has a very active role, and the Department of Education, we get an email on the day that it was due, saying it was not going to be submitted. So I can tell you, quite frankly, there are a lot of people pretty upset about that decision that actually worked on that grant and was promoting that grant from private industry to business to, I mean, we're talking about a commission of early learning that was made up of very eclectic people throughout the state of Indiana to move pre-K forward here in our state. So I want to tell you that the department is still actively involved in early learning. We released our standards. We have teachers all over the state using them, okay? I don't need anybody's permission to send out those standards and do any of that. We are actively working and got infrastructure language in bills last time and the General Assembly before. We keep chipping away to get infrastructure language in our state law so that we can get closer and closer and closer to students, no matter where they go to pre-K, they go to a quality pre-K. And what does that look like? So you're all kidding yourselves if you think the state of Indiana is going to do something big in this arena. So it's going to take a push from the people and the Hoosiers in the state to move pre-K forward because all pre-K pretty much is funded by federal dollars. The state of Indiana has not even moved from its attendance age, mandatory attendance age of grades of age 7. Age 7. We do not mandate kindergarten in the state of Indiana. We may pay for full-day kindergarten finally, but we don't mandate it, okay? And if you think that General Assembly is going to go down to pre-K, you better think again. It was a political decision to run a pilot, pure and simple. It was political. But if you think our General Assembly is headed in that direction, I don't think so. But it will take a push from everybody to make that go where it needs to go. Pathways for all students, I'm all about it, making sure that kids leave our high schools with some relevance to what it is they're learning and feel like they have a pathway when they leave us, whether it's workforce, whether it's college, whether it's career, it doesn't make any difference to me. That goes along with the diploma work that we have going on, and I'm excited about the diploma work that is happening. It's going to head us in a good, strong direction, and I will tell you, traditional public schools are the only entity that can provide career training to our kids. They are the only entity in the entire platform. It is going to be our saving grace, to be quite honest. We're the only ones that can do it. And so we have to be sure that we're providing avenues for all children in the state and making sure that we're the ones that actually make that happen. I have formed the Blue Ribbon Commission, and that is all about you. And so you need to know the time is now to talk about you, your profession, our profession, what it's going to look like, how we're going to support it, how we're going to retain our teachers, how we need to recruit our teachers. What does that look like? I have 49 members of the Blue Ribbon Commission, and 47 of them are educators. 47 of them. And there's a reason I have such a large group, and we're going to be working in a lot of small groups and then coming back together, because I got to hear from all facets of the education community, from higher ed down to pre-K and in between. I have to hear from all facets. People say, Glenda, do you have a preconceived notion of what we need to be doing? Absolutely not, because I haven't heard yet what it is you want to have happen with our profession. But we have to do something, and it's a good time to bring it before the legislature, because you know what the next year is? It's an election year. And so we have a prime opportunity to be sure people listen and give respect back to our profession. And what is that going to look like? And I'm going to be leading the charge with that. And if any of you in here actually serve on that commission, thank you ahead of time for that. But we're going to be having some very robust conversation. There's a web page. If it's not up already, it'll be up there soon, dedicated to the commission. You'll be able to see the information and the data. And when we have a median salary level of $35,000 for beginning teachers, something's wrong. Something's wrong with attracting people to our profession. Because in today's society, when you go through 4 years of college and you've got debt from that, you do not expect to earn $35,000. It's not right, and it's not comparable with any other profession that has to have that type of education in order to become a teacher. So we have a lot to talk about and a lot to move forward with. And then I serve on the executive branch. And I think a lot of people forget that. I am a member of the executive branch of the Indiana government. And with that, I serve on many commissions, and most of them tie with economic pieces. And I will tell you that our current governor does not have economic strategies to move anywhere tying to our educational policy. And we have to have that in place. We cannot continue to be 39th in the nation in per capita income. We cannot continue to have 29% of our jobs be low-wage jobs. And I know you work, no matter where you work, you have poverty of your children in your schools. I don't care if it's in an affluent area in the state of Indiana, there's poverty. And when I travel, I see backpacks of food go home every weekend, grocery bags go home to families. There's a reason for that. Kids are living in poverty. And we are like blinded to this at the state level, but we're not at the local level. And so we have to tie those strategies together. When you have a snow day, I'm not worried about making up the academics, because we'll make those up. I'm worried about kids having no food for the day. Literally, having no food for a day after day after day, and then coming back to your classroom, not ready to learn. They're worried about where their next meal's gonna come from. They're not worried about the science experiment of the day. So we have a lot of work to do with that, making sure that we can make some connections with that. So in 2012, it was an uphill battle to elect a governor that was going to work alongside me with public education. In fact, it didn't happen. But now, not just you, but the Hoosiers actually see the connections between the superintendent's role and the governor's role. And that includes the appointments of those who serve on the State Board of Education. It includes the direct links to education policy and economic strategy. It includes education policy versus the political decisions to actually serve our children. So education of our children is not partisan. So don't think for a minute that it's a partisan matter. For me, no matter the political party or the person running for office, they must hold the ideals of providing and servicing public education. And that's as simple as it is for me. It's as simple as it has been my entire voting career. We currently do not have an education governor. Governor Pence's strategies to improving schools is simply to add more schools. It is real. We're having a proliferation of schools in the state of Indiana that we're supporting with our dollars. We are moving around the same children, and we are moving around the same staff. It's as simple as that. When you open up new schools, you know you have to have a full staff there. And they're not bringing in more staff out of the state of Indiana to supply the demand. And they're not bringing in more children to supply the demand for the more schools. We're simply creating more schools. So this year, we're going to be #1 state with the most voucher students. Nothing to be proud of. Absolutely nothing to be proud of. Imagine 40 more years of the governor. What will public education look like? That needs to be your question. Will public education actually be out of business in 4 more years? When I decided to continue my service as superintendent and run for re-election, I sat down with John Gregg to have a very serious talk about education. I am supporting John Gregg for governor, and it's pretty simple. He supports public education, he supports me, and he supports teachers. We must have new leadership in Indiana. Re-electing me will be a much harder road than in 2012. The opposition, quite simply, wants me gone. I am in the way of the political agenda. A lot of money is going to be spent against me. And we're going to need to dig deeper into our pockets and spend more time communicating our message, but we will prevail. I perfectly know that that's going to happen, but it's not going to be an easy road. We have a little over a year to get organized. I have brought my bumper stickers and my donation cards to start that conversation. And bumper stickers, you may say, hey, I don't want to put something on my car. They peel right off, but it communicates. It communicates to Hoosiers at large when they see you driving down the street. Your voices, individually and collectively, are actually the reason that I can run for re-election. And this position is not appointed, but still elected. So the conversation in the General Assembly last year was about doing that to me. But because of the voice of those who believe in public education, I actually can run for re-election. So you should be proud of all the efforts that we did. I am proud to be a teacher. I am proud to be an ISTA NEA retired member. And I did join while I was an active teacher. And I don't have to pay any dues now. So believe me, not only is it worth it, just a little plug here for Sarah's talk, not only is it worth it, but you start to get the information about being a retired member, a retired teacher early, and you can start to plan and see what that needs to happen and what it is that looks like. So I also encourage you to join while you're an active teacher, be done with the dues, and get the information and move forward with that. So I'm proud to be an ISTA NEA retired member. I am proud that you will again elect me to be part of Indiana's executive branch of governor to serve the students and you in the state of Indiana. But most importantly, you need to know that I promised in 2012 to make education the #1 topic talked about. And it is. And it will be the #1 topic in 2016. You can count on me making sure that that's the case. When you see me in the news, it is by design. And I want to be there, I want to be out there, and you guys need to just spread the word, talk about the articles, talk about the topics, and don't talk amongst yourselves. Just like in 2012, it has to be to everybody you know. That's how people get elected. That's how we move government. That's how government is moved. And we can't allow just those who are elected to be able to run that show. So with that, thank you so much for endorsing me. I look forward to your support and our continued work together to make things what they need to be for public education in the state of Indiana. Thank you very much.